welcome to this conversation presented by White House Custom Color. I'm Jed Toffer. Thanks for listening. You know, my wife Vicki and I have owned and operated our photography studio, V Gallery, for 20 years now. White House has been our lab for the last 16 of those years, and we could not be happier. White House is a family-run business, just like ours. If you haven't already, check them out at WHCC.com. And if you want to drop me a line, feel free to email me at jed@WHCC.com. A few years back, I was with a group of people where somebody was kind of lamenting about how much the industry has changed. At some point during the conversation, someone asked what my thoughts were about how different everything was and how different it seemed like it was going to be. I answered with a metaphor that had been forming in my mind as I listened to the mild rant. I said that I felt like we were all standing on a beach and a big tsunami was headed our way. We all knew that it was enormous and powerful. We all saw it coming. And the way I saw it, we had three choices. Stand up to the tsunami as though it wasn't really a big deal. Turn tail and run for the hills. Or grab a surfboard and ride the wave like a boss. Ted Linczak grabbed a board. And he and his wife, Rachel, are still riding those waves. Ted is all about doing your best no matter the circumstances. He tackles typical by knowing his craft as well as he can, both behind the camera and in the sales room.
So start off and just tell me who you are and where you're from and a little bit about what you guys do.
Sure, yeah. So I am Ted Linczak along with my wife, Rachel Linczak. Mm-hmm. We own and operate Nuvo Images in Charleston, South Carolina. I am originally from the Cleveland, Ohio area, Northeast Ohio, which pretty much spent my whole upbringing there. We started our business back in 2006, so it's kind of a whirlwind thing for us. I met Rachel at Baldwin Wallace. We both attended Baldwin Wallace, which is outside of Cleveland. It's a small little university. I met her there, and it's kind of a funny story. I don't advocate this for everybody, but it's like we met in September of 2005. I proposed to her in December of 2005, and we got married in July of 2006. I know, it's crazy.
Really?
It's crazy. It's a true story. But, 13 years later, here we are. So it was crazy.
You just knew.
I just knew. I mean, it sounds so cheesy because people say that, but...
Obviously, you just knew.
I just knew.
And so did she.
I just knew. We, after a couple of weeks, I think we were both... This sounds so, I don't know, like I'm above everybody, but I felt we were more mature than a lot of people our age at the time.
Well, maybe you were.
I mean, I don't know if that's true. In many ways, we probably weren't, but I feel like we were rooted, good family systems, good good value system, and we just said, this is great. So I don't know. I don't advocate that for everybody.
But it's holding up.
It is holding up. We're still alive. We have three cats that we love, and they love us, of course. So I guess that's an indicator.
So you're in Charleston, and your bread and butter is weddings.
We're in Charleston now. We moved there about 6 or 7 years ago. Main bread and butter is weddings. We do a decent amount of portrait work. Always looking to expand that. But it's been a fun ride. I mean, it's been a fun ride. I always tell people, if you told me 14 years ago or 13 years ago that I'd be photographing weddings for a living, I probably would have laughed at you.
Really?
Because I was not at all into photography in any way, shape, or form. I always viewed myself as artistic. Yeah. And I was little, and the joke was I thought I was going to be a Disney animator, which is hilarious. Do they animate anything? And it's all on a computer, right? But that was like my dream.
Right.
I loved to draw, so I always had this artistic side. But when I met Rach, her parents and her mom, who is she's a master photographer, she's very accomplished. She had just started getting into doing weddings and portraits, and she was the one that first kind of showed me what weddings were and what photography was. And Rachel said, "Hey, my parents do this photography thing. Would you ever consider doing it?" And I was a business major. I thought I was going to be a CPA, and that was my whole, which is hilarious when I think about it now.
But also being a CPA. Pretty awesome now to be able to bring that into the mix.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, a lot of people need what you have.
Absolutely. It's just so funny because it's just a different world in a lot of ways. But yes. So she started showing me this stuff, and I said, "Yeah, why don't we give it a try? Let's see if we can start this photography on the side, like how everybody does, right?"
Yeah.
But we got married in 2006. We put a website up. I designed it myself. If you saw it, it was like on GeoCities or something. Sure. It was ridiculous, the worst thing in the world. But we started booking clients.
Yeah.
And I tell people we did a ton of things wrong. We did a few things right, but within about 6 months, we were booking enough to go full time.
Yeah.
You know, and I got my degree. I was supposed to go back because, like, for your CPA, it was like another year of credits that I needed. I forget what it was, but I never ended up going back. I just got my bachelor's, and we just decided, let's go full force, and the rest is history.
And
I guess.
here you are.
Here I am.
So we're going to talk about, how do you word it?
Tackling typical.
How
to dominate the average wedding day, yes.
Tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's a class I've done in a few different forms over the last couple of years, but the main gist of it is, how can we as wedding photographers consistently go into any situation and come out victorious, for lack of a better way to explain it?
Well, because there's so many variables.
There's a ton of variables.
Right.
And not every wedding is the most incredible venue and the most incredible time, right? Like and occasionally, yeah, but the majority is, not to put it down, it's just average, small venue. You may only have 30 minutes. The couple may not be the most photogenic, amazing, fabulous model couple in the world.
Right.
But how does that mean that we don't come away with great images as wedding photographers? We kind of have to.
Right.
Because that's what we're getting paid to do.
That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So the main part of it, though, looks at, people always want a silver bullet. They say, well, okay, what are you selling? What's the thing that's going to do it? And the gist of the program is knowing your craft, like understanding your craft in an incredibly intimate way. Understanding lighting and posing and composition in a way that you can walk into any room and quickly decipher what is the best composition, what's the best corner, where are the lines leading, where is the light falling the best, and then once we do that, what kind of pose, what kind of moment do we want to create? I've always found every struggle that I've had when I get into a situation, I'm trying to figure out something. It's never my camera. It's never because I don't have the newest Sony. It's never because I don't have the best lights. It's because there's something limiting me in my brain, not knowing how to work the posing and not knowing how to work the light. That's what tends to be the block for me. So I focus on the craft to show people that the gear and all that's all well and good, but you have to understand lighting in an intimate way. Because as wedding photographers, like you said, we deal with all kinds of lighting.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? I mean, natural light, of course, it could be beautiful, but what if it's a cloudy day and it's incredibly overcast?
Right.
I mean, are you just going to say, well, it'll be fine and we'll still shoot? Or do we maybe need to know how to bring our own lighting and sculpt and shape with our own lighting?
Right.
And off-camera lighting or video lights or whatever. Same with posing. Couples invest a lot of money. They want to look incredible. Brides want to look incredible. I don't believe the line that people hire you and then say they want to look average. They want to look incredible. So posing comes into play. How do we make someone either shine and look their best, or if we don't know posing, we can actually make them look horrible.
Right. You can make it actually worse.
Yeah.
Right.
So it centers around all those craft fundamental things that I think a lot of people poo-poo, for lack of a better word. They say, I know lighting and I know composition, but it's trying to dig deeper to show people, do you really know? Do you really spend time consistently honing that? Mm-hmm. So that's the main part of it. Yeah.
Where do you? Let me ask it this way: where do you get your objective standard regarding things like lighting or posing or anything that in a sense can be considered subjective to some degree?
Yeah.
But where do you draw from to say, like, this is how it should be done?
Yeah, that's a great question, because every time this topic inevitably comes up, that's kind of what a lot of people say. And it's kind of almost the discussion of, well, art is art, whatever you create. And it's kind of, which to a point, I guess I'll have a two-part answer to your question, because I think that's maybe the macro level part of that discussion.
Yeah.
When it comes in, is art? Is anything, as long as you create from your heart, is that all that matters?
Right.
So let me handle the macro, and then maybe I'll handle the micro about inspiration.
I like you going at it that way. Yeah. I like that.
So on the macro level, my whole thing with art is art. This is the analogy I always use when we have this discussion, because it's a valid discussion. I liken photography to music. They're both art forms, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and even if you're not a musician per se, you played the radio, you've taken a music class in elementary school. Most people are familiar with the basics of music.
Right.
So I always tell people, okay, pretend like at my imaging class, if I rolled in a piano and I rolled it to the center of the stage and I sat down, everyone got really quiet, and I lifted up the, whatever you call the thing that covers the keys. I lifted it up, I sat down, and rather than playing some amazing concerto, I began banging my fists on the keys, right? If I did that for 2 or 3 minutes, I mean, the room would clear out. Probably would never get asked to speak at PPA again.
Most likely, yeah.
Yeah, and people would leave, and they say, what are you doing, you know?
Right.
So say I did that for a few minutes, and I stopped, thank God, and then everyone came back in, and I surveyed them, and I'd say, okay, guys, who thought that was music?
Yeah.
And who thought that was noise? Most people probably would say it was noise. There's always someone. There's like always one hipster person. They're like, yeah, I love that. That was amazing. Yeah, there's always one. But by and large, people would say it's noise. And why? Why would they say that? Rightfully so, because in music, in every single song from Bach to Beethoven to Taylor Swift,
right,
as complex or as simple as it gets, there's a root, there's a foundation, there's chords, there's progressions,
right,
there's a structure. So even though music is this incredible thing where we can have this unique flair and people could, do their own thing and do their own expression, there's still a basis, there's a foundation. And I think culture readily accepts that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That just because that now most people say it's noise. Just like you don't pick up a guitar and just start flailing the strings and moving your fingers and random, there's structure. So it's funny that in music that's readily accepted, but in photography, you roll in the metaphoric photography piano and you metaphorically bang on the keys in the same way, and instead of people walking out, people are like, "Oh my gosh, you're amazing! You should shoot weddings for a living," and they readily accept anything. I mean, not all the time, but in general, culture has become like, yeah, photography, whatever you shoot, you shoot. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm all about, we can have these discussions about what grabs you and what grabs me in different lighting, but I still believe in any genre of photography, and this is why I love PPA, it's why I love image competition, because it teaches people this. There's a foundation to every great image that's been created. There are building blocks, lighting, posing, composition, the moment maybe for different, photojournalism. I mean, we can list them, but there are building blocks. Mm-hmm. So they're either there or they're not, and I see no difference between music. So it's just funny that culture accepts one and they don't accept the other. I would say they're both the same. There has to be a foundation. That's why I'm a big believer in teaching those things.
Do you feel like the game has changed, though, in the last, 5, 10, 15 years? Have those standards shifted?
I wish I knew that. I'm not sure. I feel like the newer upbringing of photographers, the newer generation that's coming in, I hate to pick on them because I'm not that old, but I'm not that young. I'm in a weird, we're probably fairly similar in that weird stage. I don't know. I mean, there's an abundance of education, right? There's an abundance of education. It's not like you can't find these things, right? I mean, when in 2005, 2006, from 10, 12 years ago, the world has changed completely. Now you can basically go on YouTube and find anything in the universe about anything.
Yeah.
So it's odd because you have that available, but I do feel a lot of the newer generation have that attitude, and maybe it's just a generational thing, maybe a millennial thing or whatever you want to call it, that this idea of rules is constricting.
Right.
And self-expression and rules, those two words don't go together.
Right, they conflict. There's a conflict there.
And I don't believe in that. I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for everybody my age, and I can't speak, obviously, for the younger generation, but that's the $1 million question. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to solve that. I mean, I think organizations like PPA make a great effort, to try to educate people. But it's hard to say because, and we all know as photographers, there are photographers that maybe are not as good as others, but they have a ton of clients and they're making a ton. They have great. So it's a personal thing on some levels. I just say, hey, why not be a great business person and learn your craft as good as you can? Like, why not be both?
How important has that been for you? You bring that up, and you having the background that you do and the formal education to some degree that you do. Mm-hmm. How important has that been for you in your business and your success?
Like on the business side, you're saying?
Knowing about business, having those concepts and integrating them into your company.
Sure. Incredibly important because in the end, you have to make money and you have to allocate it wisely and you have to know how to grow and you have to understand just the basics. I mean, in the end, we have to make money. In the end, it's a well-being thing, right? I mean, without clients and without proper investment in your marketing and allocating those in a correct way, I mean, you have no business.
Right.
So, and on the flip side, I love the craft, and I love it's a romantic notion, the craft of photography, and we can talk about it all day. But the bottom line is, if I don't have clients, no. So it's been a tremendous help because I've had that perspective, you know. And likewise, I've seen just like we talked about, I see a lot of businesses that people get into it and they're great photographers. Yet their businesses, they go nowhere. They go out of business, or they're
Right.
constantly struggling. And it's like,
Right.
I don't get that.
Right.
Because you're incredible. And it's a lack of that business knowledge.
Right.
Look at in-person sales. I mean, we haven't been doing it that long. I mean, probably 4 or 5 years. In the last 3 years, we've really honed it in. And that's one thing that I'm amazed how many people are, I don't say against it, but almost are not interested in learning like how to sell properly.
How does tackling typical look in the sales room?
We talk about it a little bit, but not as much. Like in the hour program that I'm teaching now, I don't really
Right.
touch on it because I want to focus more on the craft.
Sure.
But
But I
overall-
mean, like conceptually,
Yeah,
even.
it's incredibly important because look at any studio, any portrait studio and wedding studio to that point, but especially in the portrait world, the top studios that are grossing however much, I mean, that are incredibly successful, they're all employing this method.
Yeah.
So when I tell photographers, I mean, can you really afford to not know how to properly present and sell
Yeah.
your work?
Yeah.
And it's amazing the discussions we get into because quite frankly, a lot of people say, oh, I'm not, it's easier to just do a gallery and it's easier to just sell the files and you've heard it. We've all heard it, right?
Well,
I
it
don't
is-
have the clients
it
around
is
me
easier.
well, it is, yeah. But once you realize, right, once you get that first sale
Yeah.
and you go in there and you've been selling $300, $400, $500 or $100, and then suddenly it's like, wow, I've sold $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. That for me, that's a light bulb. I mean, I
Right.
remember that moment,
Right.
Because I came from the perspective of saying those same things.
Yeah.
7 years ago, I said, as a very inexperienced beginner, there's no money there if you're not selling files. I thought I knew everything. Okay, that's a whole nother story. But just like a lot of us are, right? You have, I have this bad attitude at first, but then once I saw it and I said, let's try it, let's tweak it,
Yeah.
and then we got to the point where you start averaging $4,000 and $5,000 sales, and it's like, wow, who would not do that?
Right. Right.
And it's sad when I see photographers that don't. I tell people, if you're starting out, learn the right way. Learn those business fundamentals because you can
Right.
save yourself so much time and so
Right.
much heartache
Right.
and so many years of, I think about now clients that we didn't run through that system, and it makes me, cry to a point because all this money we left on the table. And it's not just about money. It's a benefit, like in-person sales in particular. It's a benefit for the client.
Right.
In so many ways, it's a crazy service to be able to sit down with them and offer them the expertise and to talk them through everything. No one else is doing that.
Right.
People that just shoot and burn and all that, there's no service there. It's a hello, give me your money, and here's a link. You know?
Yeah. Right. Here's your files.
So and we all start somewhere. I get that, but man, the quicker you realize that, the quicker you surround yourself with people that are in that realm, you will grow so much quicker.
Do you not offer digital files at all?
For weddings, we do. But for us, it's a little bit of a different animal because we focus on album sales and upselling and all that kind of thing and big books. So on the wedding realm, we offer the files, price it accordingly. But the main thing is we're upselling pages. We're selling large out. That's our focus. So for me, the files, I find they don't affect that at all.
So are they just getting the files of the album?
No, they're just getting proofs. So for weddings, we sell proofs, which I would call basic adjustments, basic kind of exposure and color adjustments.
But you're trying to sell an album.
Absolutely.
That's your goal.
And what I do personally, I tell people, I like to include a book in a collection, in all the collections. And even if your base collection, nothing extravagant, but I say offer some sort of low-cost entry book, because if the book is there and you have a proper system to pre-design an album, present, sell it it's very much an in-person sales thing. It's just not for portraits, it's for album sides.
Right.
If you have that system in place, it's almost dummy proof to the point that you can easily sell a couple $1,000s at minimum to each client if you run them through that system. And I think if the album's there already, just from my own system, I feel it's a lot easier because you don't have to sell the album.
Right.
Of course, proper pricing and all that is a big part of this discussion,
Yeah,
but
it's key.
it's key. And having an album, it's a tangible thing. I mean, our society is losing that, right? We've all heard the power of print. I mean, that's what an album is. It's a legacy product.
Is that a big motivator for you?
It is. It is. I think, and I'm guilty of not printing enough as well. I mean, right? I print stuff for the business, but my own stuff, should I be printing more? Absolutely.
Right.
We did a bridal show the other day, and something I like to bring up with everybody that comes to that kind of thing. A bride comes to the table and we talk to them. I say, yeah, these books they're legacy products. Now, it's incredible to think that in 20 years, you and your husband can look through this, but I tell people, and this is hard for all of us, imagine a world where you're gone and a future generation can actually pick up that book and look at the history of how your family started. Like, I always tell people, think of your grandparents. Imagine if your grandparents didn't print anything. Imagine if they didn't get a wedding album. Think of the enjoyment that you get to be able to look back and look at grandma and granddad. Think of that. You're going to offer that to someone by investing in something like that. So you get people in that mindset, and suddenly it's not just it's a book and I can do this at Shutterfly. And they have all these ideas of the cheapness of it. You take them to a whole new world of, this is a legacy product that will leave an impact for multiple generations, and it gets them in a totally different mindset.
I like the words that you're using.
I try.
Well,
would you like to buy an album?
Well, yeah, I'm thinking about it. Just your verbiage is important, because I think that value is based on perception so much, and the perception is very much affected by what you're saying and how you're saying it. Right?
Absolutely.
The words are powerful and important.
Incredibly important.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know that. I mean, verbiage in selling anything, like, where is you have to show people the value. So I like the terms of generational and legacy, and you get them to that, of course, away from the analytical and into the emotional, but it's real. It's not a gimmick.
Right.
I mean, it's an absolutely real thing that we can all relate to.
Yeah, there's significant value to it. Like,
significant value.
I like legitimate. Yes. It's not you're not trying to swindle anybody.
No.
Right.
And especially with portraits, it's funny. We did a road trip, but we had some time in October. We went up to New England, and we were talking before the show. We love to drive. I love doing road trips, and Rachel, she goes along with it. I trained her to enjoy driving in a car. So we did a road trip in New England and went to a bunch of different little towns. I remember this one. Rachel's a equestrian. Okay, she likes the horse thing. Yeah. So essentially, I have no money at all. So she's into that. So we walked into some equestrian shop, and there was I'll say a mediocre, that sounds bad, like a painting of a horse on the wall that they were selling. They had some other paintings, and I looked at the price tag, and it was like $1,800 for a 20 by 24 of this painting of a horse, which is whatever. But I looked at that, and and I use this illustration when I teach this kind of stuff. If a non-customized painting of a mediocre horse is going to sell for $1,800, how much should a beautifully constructed portrait of a family that is custom created for you,
for them,
that's printed, that's framed, that's guaranteed, that has amazing finish on it, how much should that be valued at?
Right.
And walk into any art gallery. I mean, how much would you pay for a beautiful piece of art? Now think of something created just for you, and that's where the craft comes in, because if you're creating stuff that that looks like it was done with an iPhone, or the lighting's not there, or we're not thinking about posing. I mean, there could be an argument. How much is that worth? But if we're beautiful lighting, classic posing, I mean, if we're creating something that no one else can create, and then we sell it correctly, we describe it correctly, we finish it correctly, suddenly it's hard to argue that, how much should that be worth? It should be worth quite a bit if it's going to last forever.
If someone is interested in really getting after this, right? Let's say they're a shoot and burn person at this point, and they're just offering files or whatnot. But what you're saying is resonating, and they're interested in kind of taking that next step. What does tackling typical look like from an educational standpoint? Like, where do they go? Where does somebody go to take that next step and to learn more?
Oh man, what a question.
Well, what resources have worked for you in particular? Because now you're a resource.
Sure, I am a resource. Of course, you can take a class if you ever see me. I would love for someone to attend. But beyond that, number one, for sales, people always ask, getting into sales, what do you learn? Are there photography books? I'm sure there are many. What we do a lot of is any sales book that you can get your hand on.
Right.
Get your hands on. And even, YouTube, we can talk about the importance of live in-person education, which I believe in, but YouTube, it could be a great resource too. There are a million sales videos on there. So don't think it has to be just about learning, from the photography standpoint. Selling is selling.
Right.
The things you say, how you approach it, the body language, and all that kind of thing. So watch as many of those as you can, because that's a free resource right there.
Right, of course.
Number one thing. Number two, things like PPA are incredibly important. And talking about the younger generation, I think there is this notion that PPA and organizations, likewise to the craft of photography, there are rules, and PPA is a bunch of old guys, and there's like this idea, right, where it's just constricting, and we don't want to be a part of that and all that kind of thing. But PPA is an incredible resource because you become a member. I mean, we can rattle off all the benefits you can get, but things like the videos that they have. I mean, there's a whole educational library of anything from retouching to business basics that you can get into. Imaging conference, which we're at right now, incredible resource, 3 days of a ton of learning. But one of the best things of PPA is getting a better perspective on the industry. And I always tell people, networking and having your clique of photographers, like we all have our own little groups in our cities where we're from, right? That can be an incredibly good thing. But sometimes it could be one of the worst things that could ever happen in your business. So let me explain. What I mean by that is sometimes people, like say, let's go back to the in-person sales, just because it's a great kind of analogy for this or a story for this. If you're grouped with a bunch of photographers that are all selling files for a couple $100 and everyone's doing shoot and burn and you're in that mentality, it's hard to escape that. Right? Because you look around and it's like everyone's doing that.
Yeah.
You have this idea that this is the universe.
Yeah.
And I tell people, when you join something like PPA, suddenly you're not in the forest, but you've climbed up to the hillside and you look at what you thought was just a few trees. It's like, man, there's a whole expanse of trees and there's a river there and a mountain. And suddenly you see, wow, people like me that don't have some fancy studio, they're just a home-based studio. They are making big bucks selling beautiful portraits, and they're normal clients that are spending money, and it gives you a new perspective. And suddenly it's like, wow, it's possible.
Yeah.
Because I think people have that impression too. They say, well, you can only make a ton of money in photography if you have a 8,000 square foot studio and all that stuff.
Right.
Listen, we've always had a home studio for 14 years.
Yeah.
And we've done incredibly well. And I'm not saying that's wrong or that's the best way or whatever, but the idea that you have to have everything in order to make money is not true.
Right.
So join PPA, get these resources, see that there is a world out there beyond your little just clique of friends,
Yeah.
Because again, that could be a good thing, but it could be a bad thing. And I think number 3 would probably be, in terms of the crafts of photography, research out art. Look at art.
Ooh, I like that idea.
And a lot of people say
outside of the box, so to speak.
Go to an art museum. Look at the classics we think about, but even the not so Caravaggio and Rubens, and I talk a lot about chiaroscuro, in the whole context of creating dimension with light and making an image look three-dimensional. Learn from these guys because hundreds of years ago, before we had Google and Lightroom and ProPhoto and all the fancy toys, these guys were painting.
Yeah.
With more depth than, quite frankly, a lot of us photograph with today.
That's true.
And it's pretty amazing when you study Rembrandt and how he worked in his studio and how he flagged light to come in. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah.
So can we learn something from these guys? I would say absolutely yes. So look at art. And then on the flip side, spend money on education.
Right.
Get into a hands-on class. Don't think you're going to learn everything on YouTube. Because YouTube and Creative Live and all these things that we have in our culture today in the industry, they're good. But I don't think you're going to watch a Creative Live video over the weekend and know how to shoot a wedding. It's not going to happen.
Right.
Versus being in a class with a qualified instructor. Let me say that. Be careful because unfortunately the educational industry has been let's say there's a lot of people maybe in it that are just looking to make a lot of money. So look at people that are actually in the industry, that are photographing weddings or photographing portraits, that are actually doing it. I think you could probably learn the most from some of those people.
Right.
Because they're not just kind of all above everything and talking about things that they're not even doing.
Yeah.
So research out who you're with, but in a class, you could sit down, you can raise your hand, you can ask a question, you can have a dialogue with someone.
It's a two-way street.
You don't have that on YouTube, right?
Yeah, I like the two-way street aspect of that.
So those are some tips.
They're great.
Those are some tips.
I love the art piece in particular. I like looking outside of the industry for inspiration and to learn from. I like that. I'm also thinking of standing on the mountain, looking at the forest and the river and the other mountain. That's a really good picture. True. But you have to climb that mountain. You have to get out of that little section of the forest that you live in.
Absolutely.
Where can people find you guys?
Yeah.
Where are you at?
So on the web, if you want to see more of our work and see a little more of what we do, we basically, in a convoluted kind of way, I have 2 studios. So in Charleston, we are Nuvo Images. So if you go online, you look at nuvoimages.com, you will find our studio site there. We started our business in Cleveland. When we moved, I kind of retained our original studio name, which is Linczak Photography. That's in Cleveland. So I kept it separate. At the time, my thinking was kind of to differentiate the brand. So I don't shoot in Cleveland a ton. Occasionally for referral clients and stuff, I travel up there. But you can check out the websites. I'll also mention, if you are a photographer looking to get some great resources and some daily inspiration, I do have a Facebook group. and it's a free group. It's for pro photographers. So as long as you're a photographer in some realm, you can request to join. But it's called From Commodity to Craft. Okay, that's the group. If you search for that on Facebook, and what I do there is once a week, usually 2 to 3 times a week, I will post either a behind-the-scenes video, a lighting diagram, some information about in-person sales, live videos. I try to do an image critique like once a month where people can submit images. Obviously, there's no cost to it. And it's just, the name From Commodity to Craft. My whole thing is let's take this industry from the quasi-commodity kind of niche that it's becoming, where people think, well, if anyone can do photography, and raise it back up to an esteemed industry where it's like, wow, I need to know the intricacies of all these things to create beautiful work. So From Commodity to Craft, check it out, join the group. It's a Facebook group, so there's a ton of info. If you use the search feature, you will find a lot of videos and a lot of great discussions. So
I like the fact that you're raising the bar.
I know that's such an overused statement, but yeah, I am. I guess I'm trying
That's how I see it.
I'm trying to do my part. I mean, I've been there, just like all of us, right? You climb the ladder and then you look behind and you try to help others to get up. Because like in-person sales, if everyone does that, it doesn't hurt anybody. Like if someone in my area employs that kind of thing, it doesn't hurt my business. It raises everything up because it teaches the public that, hey, this is not just worth $50, but it's worth a couple $1,000s. That's a help to the industry, and this likewise with the craft. If we all become incredible photographers, if the PPA image competition suddenly has 5,000 diamond photographers or something like that, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
I've never been a diamond, so it's going to happen. I know. I say that
that's
not
a
as a brag. I've never been there. I've never been there, but it's a goal. But we're all better for it.
Right. I agree. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Absolutely.
With me today.
That was a pleasure.
Have a good one.
Yep.